in full honesty, it wasn't my type of movie. I would say it wasn't bad, but it wasn't my type of movie. But I came out of it, cinematography was insane and acting was insane. I just feel like I need to watch it again.
Well, I would say, listen.
I feel like I'm gonna watch it very differently the second time.
My wife had the same reaction.
Yeah.
So, but then she watched it the second time when we watched it. Like we watched it in Venice, and she watched it in the premiere. She's like, I liked it more the second time.
And I'm sure I was also influenced a little bit. I saw the Rotten Tomatoes or whatever. I'm like,
it's hard not to be influenced by.
Welcome to season 2 of How They Filmed That, where we break down movies, TV shows, and commercials with the people who are actually there making it, telling us the true BTS, the secrets of what happened on set, and how they created these incredible filmmaking masterpieces. The first season started with Sher and Joker, and they had just finished shooting Joker Folie, Deux, and he showed me production stills way before it was out. So it's only fitting that we talk to Larry and break down Joker Folie, Deux now that it's out. And this is an interesting interview.
I've directed a movie that nobody really saw. Maybe open your eyes to like, it's a movie that maybe didn't fit your expectations. And like, that's not my choice, even if it makes me frustrated.
Because no matter how good of a filmmaker you are, movies are not always received in the way that you hope. But there's no doubt that the cinematography in Joker Folie, Deux is breathtaking.
It's a tiny little thing, but if you watch it again, it's actually an impossibility of...
I don't think I even realized
the door of the car opens, which makes him stop and have to double back. That gives us a chance to get ahead of him. Mm-hmm. When we get ahead of him, we're able to hand the Ronin off to a grip tricks. If you haven't seen Folie, Deux, watch it.
Okay, I think before we get into the nitty-gritty discussion here, I think I have to ask a bit of like a human question. I think this is more so. It's a bit of an elephant in the room, I think. You've clearly had movies that have done incredibly well and the audience has received them well, and then you've had movies that haven't done as well in terms of the audience seeing, and you've done so much work, and you and Todd and everybody put so much work and effort. How does it feel now, after all that time and effort, for the audience to not see it the way that you guys intended it to be seen?
Yeah, it's always a bummer. It's always a bummer when you make something, one, that you're super proud of, which I am of Joker Folie, Deux. It's like, I'm super proud of it. And there wasn't a single part of it that we felt like we didn't make the movie we were intending to make. But also, it is what it is to some extent too, I think, like I said, it doesn't take anything away from how proud I am of the movie and the movie that Todd made and the movie that we made together. Nothing changes except the result, which is also the part, and this is what you definitely learn over 30 years of making movies. That's the part you can't control. That's the part that's also kind of magic.
Yeah.
In the case of Joker, it's like, oh, maybe it'll make 200 million and that'll be like a big hit for the size of the movie, and it turned into $1 billion, and that's the magic.
Yeah.
And there are other movies where I'm like, gosh, just nobody sort of responded to it. This directed a movie that nobody really saw in great measure, right?
Yeah.
So I had to deal with that and the postmortem of that.
So you've been through this.
And every single filmmaker ever has been through this. So it's not a unique situation to us.
I think it is unique though in terms of like, because so many people, it's like if I had 50 million subscribers on YouTube, then like there's even more pressure. Do you feel any of that pressure? And does that like, for example, if this now didn't get received as well, although I think you did an incredible job on it, does it put more pressure on the next one or something like that? Does it, like, on a human level, does that affect you at all? Or are you just a machine?
No. It affects it. I don't think it affects me in so much as the thing about the second film, and this is the same for anybody who does something that was like a sequel to a successful film. There is an inherent pressure because the audience out there has their own like history with the movie.
Right.
So because of that, they build up their own expectation of what they want it to be. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a risk, and it's a swing.
Yeah.
But then was the most exciting part about making it. That it wasn't this thing that I'm not a writer. So the version I went to was like, an expected version and maybe a version that would have serviced certain people. But it's like, I'm so much happier we made the version we made. Unfortunately, it didn't work out.
Yeah.
It didn't work out this round. Like it still has hopefully the history of itself across however many years, for people to sort of either rewrite history or confirm it. whatever, it still has a journey to take.
And my guess is it'll keep building over. I don't think it's going to be one of those like forgotten films. I think it's going to build. I think it's going to have a reputation. I want to hear some of the nitty-gritty stuff of making the film. I'm super interested in, like, first of all, before we go into like some of the gear that you used, how different was the approach? You know, like you talked about your Bible and all that for like first Joker. How different was the approach first Joker versus second Folie Deux? Just because it was a very different movie. Was it a completely different, or was there some aspects that you guys took from the first one to the second one?
I think we took a lot of the same ideas behind the first one, but then had this expanded palette and opportunity with the fantasy stuff and with the idea that people sing, even though generally speaking, we treated, in an unconventional musical way, we treated the music as just an extension of their dialogue. So sometimes it's diegetic. So the first time he sings in like the common room in Arkham, it's like he's singing it in the same exact space. You're not suddenly leaving to go to a new space. It's not, you know, it's slightly a fantasy because it's in his mind. It's like that diegetic singing where it's just like, it's a replacement for dialogue was the philosophy, you know, 90% of the time. There's a little section where there's like 3 fantasy sections, or 4, I guess. That stuff, you know, was maybe a callback.
Full and magical world.
Magical, like built sets, very much in the vein of like an old musical, but still shot in our same style.
Yeah.
It suddenly wasn't choreographed dancers and all these other things. It was still just the two of them in their own little fantasy, or in his fantasy, but built in a much bigger palette. And so that made it slightly different. Fundamentally, the sort of key strokes that we did on the first one, from like both a little bit of the look to the philosophy of how we did it, meaning people live and exist within like realistic places that are heightened just a little bit. So we try to light environmentally 360 from outside the spaces, very few lights inside or on stands. That philosophy stayed and maybe got amped up even a little bit more.
Which was probably harder to do, no? Because there was a little bit more like theatrical character to this movie, or or did that make it easier in some ways that you could show a light maybe?
Well, I tried not to, except in the times when we very much were going for something like that. So let's say a fantasy like The Joker Is Me, where it's a black void, spotlight comes up, he's holding a mic in silhouette as we push in and reveal that he's now painted face like the Joker, and he smashes Harvey Dent over the head with a stool, and he dances with her, and it's all in like red top light. That, of course, is very theatrical, very expressionistic. But like if he's just existing in the courtroom, we tried to make that courtroom be like a fully 360 environment. Right?
I love those courtroom scenes.
Yeah, it's like, okay, how do we attack a space that's pretty big? There's 200 people in there. It's like a very large space, both in its depth and width. How do the window light sort of travel across all those people? We used techniques that went back to like the first tiny thing I did at USC for a friend of mine, which was like a little set. It was like an early solution of how you bring daylight in through windows. Because invariably, like if we were in a real location and the actual sunlight.
We are in a real location right now. Sun's.
We're outside, exactly. But let's say we're inside a space and you wanted that window light to sort of come into the space in a really natural way. And when the light is right, when the sun is at a perfect spot, it sort of splashes off the floor, it does this. But if it's really nice in something that's 50 or 60 feet wide, it might be really great for the first 20 feet, but the other people are like in shadow. So how do you extend that? Like additional sort of like trapdoor windows. This is all the benefit of, let's say, if it's a built set, being able to put those into the set design. So above the windows, there's like another 4 or 5, 6 feet of wall. We cut into those like these little panels that could open up really quickly, like swing open and hinge open. And behind there, we have other lights. So you could see the window, because if we brought the lights far enough down to dig deeper into the space, well, you'd see the lights in the shot. So this way, those sets of window lights hits Arthur and hits that side of the courtroom. But the windows that are above there, we now push other light in that hits the other side of the courtroom in a natural way. And having that is like a perfect way to like make it fully 3-dimensional, fully 360, and it still feels like the windows are doing all the job.
For the first Joker, you showed me some of your decks. Can you show me some of your decks on Shot Deck for kind of maybe some of the inspiration for maybe even a few scenes? We're getting spiked here. Let's move over there. We'll see you guys in a second.
All right, good. All right, so the working title of Joker, Folie à Deux, was Juliet, right? So this is just
Romeo
an example.
was Joker 1?
Romeo was Joker 1.
Yeah.
So you can see Romeo, Joker 1. Usually I'll start, this is Joker 1. I'll start with the same kind of normal composition, tone, lighting. Those will be like what I start with. And those
like
are
high
just,
level.
just like if I'm just starting to pull images and just toss them somewhere. It's also the first conversations I'll have with Todd.
Yeah.
Is just be like, what's capturing your eye? Or is this an anamorphic movie? Is this a spherical movie? Whatever conversations you're going to have with a director, I usually start with those early days ones. I started here this time with like an early, I called it early catch on. And it was just like anything that I wanted to talk with people about. I remember this shot from Beanpole. One of it was just, it never plays in the movie, but I always remember this as such a stark color, this green and yellow. And I love the way it was shot. And I dropped it in here so we could have a conversation with Todd and Mark Friedberg, the production designer. I don't think it ever came up in a real way after that. But I just remember, one, it's about basically a hospital, so it had some overlap there.
Yeah.
And so I jumped in there just to kind of have the conversation, you know? You know, if I go through here, it's like there's a shot from The Elephant Man, there's a shot from like all kinds of things, and they're not necessarily what you would think they were for, you know? There's something about Funny Girl, and there's something about Barbra Streisand's face in that movie that I felt like, really made me think of Lady Gaga. And again, I can't speak to anything in this movie that would be referenced from this shot.
Yeah, you're not trying to replicate this exact same shot.
In fact, I haven't even re-looked at this, you know?
Yeah.
It's truly just like a catch-all for like thoughts.
And how much do you guys use this with Todd to get on the same page?
It's just exactly that. So if we're in a meeting, like you and I are sitting here, we'll just talk about things. And sometimes it'll just be like, here are some films that maybe we want to just feel if there's some part of what that movie does with music that we want to talk about. So if this was like an early musical, you know, it's Cabaret, which was also, you know, one of those shots I saw. You know, even if something like Purple Rain, which I don't think I watched really, I put it in there so I was like, because it was a memorable musical movie where it's like needle drop songs, you know, that are like not written for the movie, but there's songs from there. But, you know, whatever it might be, you know, I don't even know why I put, you ever see Bugsy Malone? Bugsy Malone is like a movie from, let's see when it was, from 1976. So I was 6 years old. This movie is wild, man. If you haven't seen it, it's Alan Parker, who's a great, you know, he made Fame, he did all these things, a great filmmaker and did a lot of sort of musical stuff. It's basically a gangster movie like Godfather, but made with 12-year-olds. So it's like early Jodie Foster. Scott Baio from like Happy Days is in this movie, but Jodie Foster and all these things, right? But it's this bonkers movie that they treat like a real gangster movie, right? Except it's
kids.
And the kids have these Tommy guns that kill people with whipped cream. Anyway, it's wild. So when somebody dies, it's like a shot like this. Anyway, even that movie somehow is like, I don't know.
Is inspiration.
Or just like revisit it in that way, right? And so this is just, I'm just laying you into some of the process of like what I will throw in there. You know, for me, there's probably not a movie per se that sort of stands out as like, oh, this is a movie tonally. But for me, I think something like All That Jazz is a movie that felt like it was a singular story about a character and his kind of like death of sorts and his struggles of life. And so I feel like when I returned, I kept returning to that movie and saying, well, at least that feels like the way the music is integrated into that movie felt to me like a bit like this new Joker film.
So you're going kind of like high level, trying to explore like, okay, this is in the direction that I want. And then are you afterwards going into like, here's this scene I have to figure out now?
I mean, look at all the other things I build, right? I mean, I'm talking like props.
Right.
I'll have a thing for televisions because invariably, like we're talking to the props and we're talking to the production designer and we want to like find good televisions.
Yeah.
So what better way than for us to sit down and go, oh yeah, let's see, this television's cool. And that will help us guide trying to find that television, right? And that goes across everything. The Patty Dolan interview, right? Which is like Patty, the guy who interviews him in the jailhouse cell. Now, that also had influences from like a Charlie Rose interview that he did with Charles Manson, where they go inside the jail cell they want to make the guy look like a prisoner. So like even back then they put like shitty jail like bars, shadows on the back wall and that kind of thing. So we went to YouTube and looked at those like interviews from that time and said, oh, well, what were they doing? And there's every once in a while there's like a big wide shot in which you actually see the lights on stands, because of course it's like mostly told in close-ups. But every once in a while, they cut to like a big wide shot in which you actually see. It's kind of like in this Magnolia shot where you can see the umbrellas in here. It was like trying to find a way so me and my gaffer could talk, or in this shot from Vice where you see like the Kino flows, right? But we were going, oh, well, they would be like open face, redheads or something where they'd put a little piece of diffusion on them. And in one or two shots, you'd see them in the shot. So like here from Frost Nixon, these kind of like open face Fresnels that were part of just the production design, but also physically lighting the people. So some of it was just to have that conversation about how we would see the monitors, how we would see the other, like when you see the interviewer, but you also see the light, the camera that's shooting the person, because it's behind the stage. So that might be in terms of the multitude of decks that I have.
How much do you think you spend on just in shot deck? Like, is this like hours and hours, or is this like little bits here and there?
It's like a good half an hour, 45 minutes a day through prep. It's whenever sort of something comes up and I go, I want to feed my brain, I need a little bit of brain food, or I'm looking for something very specific, like a television or some exact example where I'm like, oh, I need to communicate this to Todd or the production designer or whomever, and I need to find something that I can say, it's not quite this, but it's like this. And so that goes across the board, right?
Do you have the courtroom in here? Is the courtroom scene?
Yeah, tons of courtroom stuff in there. But here, courtroom. And it's got a lot of courtroom stuff in there because, again, in a lot of ways, the courtroom it can just be a bit of a boring environment because it's a lot of talking, but it's also, you're sort of locked in place there, right? There's not, the camera can sort of do a lot of the positioning to tell you different stories, but, generally speaking, the prosecutor, the defense attorney stands here, there's a witness. So I just wanted to find a lot of examples. Also, I was dropping in anything just to even have conversations about sconces on the walls or the placement of the windows. Or here was an early decision, like if you look at a shot like this from Marshall, the windows, because usually, generally speaking, there's not windows on both sides of a courtroom. So the windows have to be placed on one side. And lots of times we would see the windows behind the jury. And then I was like, no, I don't want the windows behind the jury. I want the windows closer to where Arthur is. So one of the earlier discussions was just, where do we put the windows, right? And like, are they over by the defendants? Are they over by, the prosecutor? And invariably that was like one of these early decisions.
Was your courtroom, was it a set or was it?
It was a set.
Yeah. So you had leeway to choose essentially everything you wanted in terms of where the windows are.
That's exactly right. And then go, okay, we'll put the windows over by the defendants because that's where Arthur is, and we'll put the that means that the jury, which we don't see as much, will be on the far side of the space.
Why was that your decision? Or
because
why
I kept
did you
thinking
think
about let's just play out both scenarios. If the windows are on the juror side and they're furthest from Arthur, it means he's furthest from the light. And when he does get light, he's getting front light. And just generally speaking, I wanted Arthur to be more in the side light or more in the windows. He all the different atmospherics of the light, whether it's like a overcast day or a sunny day, will affect him more if he's near the window. Who's the subject of this movie? It's the defense. It's the defendant. So let's put the windows closer to the defendant, and the jury can be in the sort of light that's the least affected.
I'm curious how often, like, you do so much work in pre and all that, and then like they build it and you're like, oh shoot, I made a mistake. Does that happen?
I mean, I would love to think of a specific example. It does happen. But because obviously the benefit of having a movie where you can build a set is, and we have so many discussions doing this, we can meticulously make sure that this is going to work out, and even if we just have enough space on the stage to do this, and how much space do we need outside those windows to have the light fall in a natural way? These are all things that come up at every single stage. And what's the light going to look like? I mean, even things like decisions of like, where the defense box is, where is that box, and is that box offset forward so that the raking shot of them also includes the judge, and how high is the judge up? All these are things that we talk about many, 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 many times, you know? And even if I pick something out that's not referential, it might be referential just to be talking about the size of the defense table, or what are the practicals that are in the space. You know, this I probably picked just to have a conversation about. We have these like rounded practicals that hang within the courtroom, and it was like a conversation starter to be like, well, could they be more like this, you know?
Right.
And it also includes literally like the scouts in the Bronx to look at the courtrooms there, which were really probably more of the reference, and going, well, that's great, but if we could build it, we can make these windows a little bigger, or those kind of things.
Right.
And that kind of stuff goes all the way to like the holding cell. He spends a lot of time in that holding cell where he's waiting to go into the courtroom, or when they have a break, they put him back in the court. She visits him there. He sort of dances in there. He leaves there to go to the courtroom. All of those kind of things. And like, what should that look like? And what kinds of bars, the width of the bars. Like, these are all decisions that we like think about really meticulously, you know? And like, well, if the bars are too thin, then what's it going to look like when him and her are kissing between them? And
do you think all these little things are the secret sauce in making like a great, you have to go into these nitty-gritties to make a great film? Like,
I think there's not, the great thing about filmmaking, and this goes for a movie that is incredible and even a movie that's like doesn't work, is the same amount of decisions still have to be made.
Right.
No, I do think the mark of a really good film, and a film that really is crafted well and takes itself very seriously, not, you know, subject matter wise, but takes the process of making it very seriously, is that nothing happens by accident. And this goes across the whole movie. Like, I've seen the new Joker many, many times, maybe 25 times in a theater, and there are still things I notice, decisions that I had no part of, decisions in sound, decisions in mixing, decisions in all these details that I make decisions over the course of some prep, shooting the movie, and then Todd has to make decisions when he was writing it at every stage, right? And all those decisions, thousands of decisions, nothing happens by accident.
Right.
At some point, you have to make a decision, right? There's no right answer,
Yeah.
so you just sort of make a decision to move forward,
Yeah.
you know?
The worst movies, I think, are when decisions aren't made.
Yes.
You know, and like
That's
nobody,
exactly right.
like you have a meeting and nobody actually makes a call, and then it kind of ends up, nobody really knows what direction it's going right now.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So you do all this work. Does this influence now, like, your gear choices? Let's talk a little bit about, like, what you guys shot on the 65?
We still shot on the Area 65, just like the first Joker. We did test some other things early on. We tested film again, and we tested even 15 perf IMAX, because we did early
Go
on
full
go,
out.
let's do IMAX.
Yeah.
Let's actually change aspect ratios during the movie. We always sort of thought that would be really fun to do, and this movie felt like it naturally had a reason to do it. So we did that. And then once we decided on that, I said, well, let's test maybe 70 millimeter film. Let's test 15 perf IMAX. And in the end, we returned back to the Area 65 because it felt like it continued the look of the first one. It also gave us all these other freedoms besides like sound issues of 15 perf IMAX and stuff.
That's just way too loud to really get any
Do these
dialogue.
like real intimate things that we knew we wanted the camera close enough that we felt like that was going to be something that could be potentially distracting to the actors, where they know intuitively, are we ADRing this? Or whatever the solution might be, it felt like that wasn't the right one for this movie, because we wanted so many dynamic lighting changes and needed control over the lights in a way that we probably didn't need as much in the first one. We shot with a lot more LED lights this time because we could, one, put everything on dimmer boards, but also control color really specifically, but also crossfading and dimming and all these sort of...
Is that just technology advancing? Like LED was a little like, is it good? Is it good enough? And then now I feel like it's just like, it's so good that like, or is it just for this project, it was what you needed?
I think some of that same stuff was there even 5 years ago with Joker 1. It's gotten better, certainly. Some of the tools are even better. But I also was like, I don't want to sacrifice the color rendition. So I even early days did like very specific tests, testing tungsten light, old-fashioned tungsten light against an LED color, off a color meter, everything we could do. And I went 1-to-1. I did this like really extensive test. Also with film again.
Yeah.
Testing everything 1-to-1 to see how.
Are you having like a bunch of cameras, bunch of setups, or is that like, okay, let's test this specific
like
thing?
3 cameras, like a film camera, Arri 65, but also, you know, and then maybe 70 miller that was that on that test, and then tested all these LED lights, so that if it said it was like 0 green, 3200, and it was a tungsten light that was 3200, 0 green, shoot them exactly the same, and could I tell a difference? I was expecting to tell a bigger difference than I could. I couldn't really tell a difference because I really wanted to know, like, am I sacrificing something using LED lighting here versus tungsten lighting? So that was like,
that's a pretty good test, right? Like, because somebody might just look at the specs or something like that. It's like, well, in the end, it matters. Can we tell a difference?
That's
or not?
right. Well, yeah, because there was definitely a philosophy, and I've talked to other DPs about this. There's still something about tungsten light that you can't replicate. But I felt like, yes, we can replicate it.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And so I didn't want there to feel like there was a stone left unturned in terms of if I chose to have the flexibility and the speed of LED lighting, was I giving something else up on the color side?
What about lenses? What'd you guys go with?
Very similar. Very similar. We added to our lens package from the first one this set of like Hasselblad lenses that my rental house, Otto Nemens, sort of modified, and they call them Autoblads. All full frame, cover the Arri 65. And they go all the way from like a 30 mil all the way to like a 250. And those we supplemented our existing set of like Leica R's and you know, Nikkor 58 and this like Canon CP, you know, like 35, and kind of hodgepodge some DNAs from Arri Rental and some Masterbuilts, like all these kind of like hodgepodge of lenses that we used in the first one. We just added a little bit of this Hasselblad and then had a set that we really could shoot through the whole movie.
Did you guys have like a hero lens, or like this lens is only for Lady Gaga? This is like, or
not so much per person, but it was more about if we were going for something quite specifically emotional and intimate in a way that we wanted to be close to them. That was usually like that 58 Nikkor, which is very fast, 1.3 lens, really close focus like 10 inches. When Patty's interviewing and it goes really low, and he's like, you know, it's not what we should be talking about. What we should really be talking about, and like it's low and pushing in on Joaquin. That's the 58. Whereas like the lenses that are shooting the interview are more on longer side. So we wanted it to feel slightly different. And even Gaga gets the 58 at sometimes. That's a real hero lens. Wide shots were like that 35 Canon. We use the 280 and the 350 a lot. Like for instance, in the visiting center, you know, where she draws the lipstick on the glass. This shot here on Joaquin is the 280. So that 280, that's a 280 Leica, and then the reverse on that is the 350. So that intentionally we wanted to shoot really long lenses, you know.
why?
Because you're shooting through glass, and we wanted to make them really connected there, you know, based on just the content of the scene. That compression that happens from those long lenses, particularly since there's like walls next to them here. And so either we would have had to get so close and physically in there with them with these wide lenses that didn't feel right, and would just create more separation in a way that we weren't looking for in that, but also just to create that kind of sense that they're the only ones in this world together. That long lens really felt like what we were going to do. Whereas if there's big camera movement and we're coming around like on a shot like this is more like the 58. You know, because we want the three-dimensionality, but we don't want to be so wide lens that we can't get close without distortion, but we want to be able to feel the camera move, which is going to obviously come the wider the lens, the more camera movement you're going to feel.
Why don't we have some time still, why don't we talk about some of your favorite scenes or shots, and then I'd like to end off with the oneer. Spoilers will happen. Just how you were able to pull it off. What was some of the challenges of that? It's like, you know, it's a crazy moment for sure. But yeah, let's talk about some of your favorite scenes or shots even.
I'll tell you something about this shot. And this is classic where Todd is just incredible at what he does, which is every movie I've ever done with him, and this goes back to like The Hangover, but it also goes all the way through everything we've done. And because he writes everything himself and he co-writes with somebody on every movie, so he has full control of what story he's trying to tell. But he always looks at the script as a moving target as we make it. So, and it's the best thing I've ever seen a director do, which is to be like, I know I have worked really hard on the script, I know what it is, but there's always opportunities to discover more, and you're finding those discoveries and you're finding those moments while you make the movie. This shot, not in the script.
Right.
So there's a perfect example.
Yeah.
Right? That whole prison yard, right? Yeah. So in Arkham, the yard they hang out with, there's like 4 or 5 scenes out there. And this is perfect, Todd, where you go, okay, we've got the scene when he sort of talks to Brendan Gleeson's character and he finds out he's going to go to the music room. He's got a later scene where they say, you've got a visitor. They've got the scene with the umbrellas, right? And so we go, okay, we have the scene with the umbrellas. And this is just classic Todd. We knew that we were raining it that day. We shot the scene with the umbrellas. And Todd's like, you know what? We're going to try something. Like, imagine he's tied up on a little string as like punishment for something, which is an odd thing anyway. Almost like a telephone pole with like one of those balls that you kick. Yeah. It's just like a little pole with a tiny string. It's not even like a string he couldn't escape from. It's like such a sign of their like disrespect for the humanity of these people. Yeah. And it's like the 2 guys are hanging out underneath the shade, and he just goes, let's just set this up, and Joaquin's going to do something, and we'll just shoot it. Very much like coming out of climbing into the refrigerator in the first movie, which was not in the script. And it's like, and then that's what came of this.
So what is it, Joaquin? What is he? Is he's like, all right, let's do it? And,
I'm sure. But here's the thing, that I guarantee it's a conversation Todd and Joaquin were having. Oh, and this is like something I've learned from Todd, and I go, everybody should do this. Is like, that's how the refrigerator thing happened. That's how a bunch of things happen, which is, it's never Todd by himself. It's Todd and Joaquin going, we're here. What else could we exploit that is part of like the character building of Arthur that we can exploit in this space? And we try to find that in all kinds of things. And that probably shows up in every single location in some form. This one was just like, okay, let's make it rain. We don't know why he's being punished, but he's out here for a reason. Now, the truth of the matter is, him and Todd and Joaquin could have known exactly where they wanted to put this in the movie. This is exactly the philosophy of the movie, is like, set something up and discover it in real time with the camera. And they may have an exact placement, but I'm not necessarily privy to it in a good way. I'm like, okay, great.
That's what I was going to ask. How do you, like, Todd's like, we're going to do this thing. You're like, oh, all right. Like,
I just go, honestly, I'm so used to it. It's fun. So we go, all right, well, here's a good position to put it in. Let's set up, we had a crane that day. So I go, okay, let's put the base of the crane here. And then we shot it twice. So we shot it once, and then the B camera was in another position. And then we flipped over with the guards in the foreground and saw it from another perspective for like another shot. That shot didn't make the cut. But the one shot that made the cut is just as slow pushing in on him. And the truth is, on the first take, which I think was the only time we did it, it's pretty straightforward. You're just like, it's like the camera is telling you where to go. So it's not even like a decision that you make. You're just like, okay, let's keep pushing in. Okay, let's stay low. Let's start to rise here. Let's come in here. And you just sort of find what feels like, it's like you're possessed and the movie's already done and you're just doing something that has already happened.
Yeah, it's kind of that moment when you see it in the monitor and you're already seeing the movie.
That's exactly
when
right.
you know you have a shot.
I even tell my crew, I'm like, I don't know what we're going to do here, but like, act like the movie's already finished and do that. Right? Like, that's literally like, I'll say it all the time. Like, act like you're watching it in a theater already, and it'll tell you exactly what to do.
So when you guys filmed that, then were you like, okay, that's definitely going in, or you're like, I still have no idea what that was, but that was cool.
Oh no, we definitely were like, this is a great moment. It's very engaging. Just you lean in and you're sort of like, oh, that's great, and you hope it'll go in. But again, I give all that up to the editing, and it's like. Sometimes it ends up in there, sometimes it doesn't. There's some very cool things we did. I think it ended up in one trailer, one time, or one commercial spot that I saw. That was like amazing. But you go, of course, this is not going to end up in the movie. It takes too long. And so those things happen throughout the whole movie, and some end up, some don't. It's all part of just like the process.
So would you say you guys have like the structure and the bones and the compass, but then there's always room for like...
It's like you basically make sure you have the script done, and then we usually have about a quarter of every day to just discover stuff.
That's more than I would think that.
That's really
cool.
It's great. It's great. Awesome. And also it's like we are under the philosophy that if we do something and we want to try something different, we just reshoot it the next day, or we shoot it the same day. Meaning, at any point, if Joaquin or Gaga or anybody or Todd is like, nah, let's try it again, but to try to explore something, we do it then. There's no idea that we're going to sort of go back and try to fix it later.
Right.
The idea is like, let's explore everything, and which is the greatest way to make a movie. We work so quickly and so efficiently for this reason, so that we can give them time to explore and time to discover things that, you know, most of the time, some version of that shows up, and the parts of it that are so fun and also kind of amazing and magical is that they weren't scripted and that they were discovered by Todd and Joaquin and the crew in real time.
So cool to hear. Let's go through some more of your favorite. That was one of my favorite shots.
Yeah.
Let's go through some of your, for whatever reason, whatever sticks out to you.
Well, interestingly enough, this is like just it's not that exciting of a shot per se, but it's the first time not in a fantasy where he actually is wearing the Joker makeup. And it's when basically the judge says, you know, we've checked, and as long as you don't blah, 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 we're allowing you to wear whatever you want in court. And it cuts to him sort of now with power and sort of like self-assuredness, and he's now embodying the Joker that we sort of been waiting for. And it's just this powerful push in straight on that he finally has backlight in the movie. If you look at the movie, he's always side lit, and he's like sort of is in whatever that window light is. But this whole scene where he cross-examines Gary and he does that, this scene is the first time he's getting sort of the power of backlight and also the sheen of it all. And it's like he's on stage, even though he's not in a fantasy and he's in the real place.
And so you guys consciously made some of those decisions to make this has to feel different.
Yeah, and so the shafts of life, it's all like enhanced, like he's finally on stage, even in the real world. So even when this shows up on screen, I always sort of go, oh, I like the way that turned out, because it makes me feel like what I wanted it to feel like there. You know, a scene that, you know, I can find it in another space, but one of the scenes that I love is the scene where they break out of Arkham, they hide behind a wall, and these searchlights start trying to look for them.
Yeah.
Because it's a really active example of one, even in that huge space of the night exterior, where me and my team are trying to environmentally light the whole space. So we're using sort of faked flame bars, but also vortexes that are mimicking basically that side of the building on fire, because she's lit the piano on fire, they've escaped from the room where they watched the movie, they're now outside. So that provides this like firelight. So we put our own lighting over doorways and all these things that didn't exist in location so that they could exist in real time across the whole space. And then we had to introduce these spotlights that kind of had the life of their own. So like we're in real time telling them like, just miss them. So as they run, it's like, oh, just miss them, or hit that back wall so that it's silhouetting them, but don't hit them. And then they hide behind two cars, they kind of kiss, and then she stands up basically being like, now let's get caught. And she wants to sort of like make a scene. So they stand up, and as they stand up, all these xenons hit them all at once, and it like lights them on fire in this white light. They dance in the rain, and then they run to the public down by there with the cameras and stuff, and they jump on the thing and they get ripped away. That whole scene, which really we tried to take from Escape all the way to the, covers a huge landscape, but it's still shot exactly under the same philosophy. We're not lighting a shot. We're not lighting this section. We're not shooting just this section. We're literally going, you guys take the whole thing, and we put like 5 or 6 cameras on it. We have cameras like hidden in the crowd, so when they jump on the fence at the end and they get ripped away, there are 2 cameras handheld to capture that. We have a Steadicam at the top that lets them go into this camera. So we're like basically saying like, just do it in real time and we'll capture it in all the shots that end up in the scene, you know? So that's a scene that I always really loved, because I know like what it meant to sort of accomplish that, but also I like the exuberance that it feels like when you watch it on screen.
Definitely. Yeah, that's a memorable scene.
Oh, here, I like this. This first time Arthur sings, right? He sings, you know, For Once in My Life, right? Which is, he's met her, They talked in the hallway, and he comes back to this common room where everyone sits and watches TV. And Harvey Dent we're going to try this guy. He's fit for trial, and he's going to go to court. So he knows now. And then somebody's like, "You're going to fry. How does it feel, Arthur?" And he sings for the first time. This shot is also very much in the sort of vein of the style that we do, which is we shoot it with some other coverage, and we sort of discover in a couple setups, probably 2 setups, what the scene is and what Arthur's going to do and how he's going to move through the space. And then we basically take a 45-foot techno crane, a Scorpio, with a matrix head on it, which allows us to sort of kick out and make a really low profile so we could go over the tops of people. We start in one position in the space and then just follow him wherever he goes in an unbroken shot. So this shot, the first time he sings, mostly is like, it's not about a big wide shot. It's about him traveling through space and singing, and the camera is literally just like sweeping over the tops of people's heads in a way that is invisible to the audience, because what we're all trying to do is just follow him. But you couldn't do it with a Steadicam. You can't do it with a dolly. The only way really to accomplish it is this Scorpio with a matrix head. And we have this incredible
Can you
crew.
explain a little bit what a Scorpio and a matrix
It's basically the technocrane, which is a crane that telescopes. So unlike, a big base of a crane arm that's fixed, which you'd have to move the base to move the camera, or you could swing the arm, this has this flexibility of being able to sort of telescope. So that allows you to kind of move it in a lot of ways. Like, we move it like a Steadicam, but it can do things a Steadicam can't do. It can go over the tops of people's heads. It can go really high. It can go right down to the deck. It can do all these kind of things. But yet the skill of the team that we have allows us to basically take the camera and weave it through, and we talk through the whole take in these whisper quiet things and sort of say, okay, wrap around. Okay, I want to get to the front. Okay, now he's going to start to go away from us. Let him get away. But now, as he pauses here, let's go behind him. And now, as he turns to us, we're going to lead him a little. And then as he comes around here, pull back a little wider. And then let him get away. And then as he sings at the end, let's push in and push in and push in and push in. And that's kind of how we shoot these scenes. And it's awesome because they're, one, fully free, and you're sort of just creating this kind of jazz idea, making the movie. But every take, we can have an opportunity to do something different. And so that first time he sings, which is obviously a very important part of the movie, and it's revealed, spoiler, that like it's in his head, because you then cut to that shot that we just talked about, where he's laughing in the rain, and that's where Todd's like, that's where it's going to sit, which is amazing. This shot and this scene is something that is one of my favorites as well.
Was there any moments making this movie where you're like, this is just not work? Like, how do we make this work? Or what was like a really big? Was there a big challenging scene or moment?
Honestly, it's like, for me, I sometimes will like record myself like after shooting on a day, or sometimes before shooting, and like, what am I worried about? And this scene here was the first time he sang. It was maybe 8 or 10 days into shooting. We started with all the stuff in Arkham, and then basically moved to the B ward, which is like the music space, and then shot Gaga stuff in Arkham, and then we moved to the courtroom, and we sort of shot in order to some extent. And I remember this was like a day in which you're like, okay, is this going to work?
Yeah.
Like, is this idea of like, what does it feel like when you actually see some singing in this movie? And because of course it's not like it wasn't without its nerves. Like, you're sort of going, oh, this is an interesting take. Is it going to work? And my little blog post to myself was like, oh shit, that really worked. And I think we all collectively were like, I feel like this is working, and we really liked it. And so carry on. And then we sort of just were able to sort of gauge the rest of it. And
that was like breaking the ice in a way.
Yeah,
like, it was like starting the movie and then starting the first
time you see him sing out. Yeah, exactly. You'd be lying if you weren't saying, okay, this is like, anytime you take a swing like this, you'd be kidding yourself, or be sort of to like not go, oh, how's it gonna feel? You know? And we felt great after it. This section here where they get married and they sing in this sort of bar. I love this section of the movie. It is, along with the rooftop dance and this like Joker and Harley show thing. Yeah, they're the most sort of realized kind of sets that would be, I guess, quote unquote fantasies, in which we're going. The Joker and Harley show, which by the way is pretty early in the movie, And so for people who are like, wait, this isn't what I wanted, if they were watching the movie and they were thinking to themselves, like, wait a second, this isn't what I wanted the Joker's in this show, like we're not aware, and that the characters are a reflection. If you really watch Joker, and I wish even for the people who maybe didn't like it or thought like, wait, this wasn't what I wanted, would watch it again, because I think what you'll notice is the characters are a reflection of what you're feeling. And in this scene, Arthur stops the music and he says to Harley, wait, I just have a feeling we're not giving the people what they want. And then she's like, okay, let's give the people what they want. And she shoots him, right? It's like we are aware that like this is a swing that's in a slightly different direction than maybe what you wanted.
It's a little bit of breaking the fourth wall in a different kind of way.
In a subtle way, but still, I think maybe people didn't pick up on it, is even at the end, it's like her rejection of Arthur because he decides he doesn't want to be Joker, and he says, I'm not Joker. And her rejection of him, it doesn't go without its irony or its sort of self-awareness that any audience rejection of Joker, Folie, the movie, is a reflection of what's happening in the movie with her rejecting Arthur. So there is a new lens from which you can watch this movie that I think you'll recognize that like the movie understands the audience. They're not rejecting the audience. They're understanding their frustration with Arthur making a decision that's true to himself. Todd and the director, and then the filmmaker is making a decision that's true to the film that they want to make, not necessarily being met with the same acceptance that he was expecting.
That is a hard thing. Like, I guarantee you, like any movie that you've worked on, if I watched it with you and you gave me kind of like the director of photography's commentary on it, I would have so much more, even more respect, or even more like if I already liked it, I would like it even more, because now I know these, like, it's like if I went to, the Louvre in Paris and I had the artists there telling what was happening when they were making it, I would have a completely different perspective.
But I'm not even saying you need to know how we made the movie to enjoy the movie. What I would say though is, there's two movies I'll give you an example of. Two movies I were so frustrated by. And I would say maybe hated them. That now both movies I love. One was Eyes Wide Shut. Huge Kubrick fan. His last movie, he was already dead when the movie came out. So I'm like, he's not making any more. I was really excited for it. I knew he had spent 2 years making it, and I hated it. It was something just didn't work for me. And every move and every decision and even the weird fake backgrounds and just felt like a mistake. And I was like, holy shit. Then I watched it again and I was like, you know what? Now I didn't have my expectations. I didn't even have anything. I just had the movie I already knew. And I was like, wait a second. By the third time I watched it, it was like, wait, this movie is one of my favorites. And now when I watch it, I'm like, oh my God, it's great. The other movie is Uncut Gems. Uncut Gems destroyed me. I'm like, what the you just do, Safdies? You killed Sandler, you killed his brother. And what I realized afterwards was like, all right, you pissed me off. And I was like really pissed off for like hours afterwards, maybe even days. But then I was like, wait a second. One, it made me feel something. Even if it made me feel anger. But now when I watch it, it's like mad respect. And also I really appreciate all those decisions. And I'm like, yeah, but you know what? I don't get to just choose what happens to Adam Sandler. That's like the Safdie's choice. And like, that's not my choice, even if it makes me frustrated. So all I'm saying is, I think now that you know what the movie is, if you watch it a second time, I think genuinely you will see it in a different lens, and at least maybe open your eyes to like it's a movie that maybe didn't fit your expectations, but if you watch it with a different lens, it's a movie that I think you'll appreciate. I really genuinely do. I'm not trying to sort of.
I think it's hard to not appreciate what you guys did, but I think it is exactly what you talked about. It's the expectations that makes a lot of sense, and I'm now excited to watch it again after this conversation, because now I do have that artist telling me the the behind the scenes stuff and all that. Like,
all right, wait, I'll give you one little thing. And then we could talk a little spoilers about this like final scene, right? Which is, this is subtle. This is nothing, but it's like something that I appreciate only because it's like a tiny thing that I was like, oh, that kind of worked. Which was the first shot of the movie after the cartoon, right? open on basically curtains opening, and you see like lights coming on, which is very much the movie, right? It's like showtime.
Yep.
It's like there's a sense that the whole movie, it's with the music, everything is there for a reason. It's like that we are on a stage, like the whole world's a stage. That's entertainment, all the things that are like playing in the movie. So we're introducing Arthur by finding him as these lights go on, like a play, and then we hinge into him in the cell. Well, to make that camera move, we didn't want to do it Steadicam because it felt too floaty. We didn't want to do it to handheld to start out because it felt too messy, and we didn't know whose point of view it was, right? Because we haven't met Arthur yet. And so we did that with a crane again. But because it hinges and pans right, and then the cell door opens and you see Arthur for the first time, and then he comes out of the cell and we look back at ourselves. Well, we couldn't do that because we'd see the crane.
Right.
So there's a slight just blend between two shots there. So that as we hinge and he comes out, we now move to Steadicam, right? And so it's a very subtle thing that is exact use of what like visual effects or the idea of like wanting to just stay with Arthur and be with Arthur, but doing it in a way where you go, how do you solve this? It's just a very simple blend. Most people wouldn't notice that it's there. The second thing is, then we're following Arthur, right? But if you followed him all the way to where he throws out his basically piss, that's what they do each day. They take out the piss in their room. It's really gross. But basically we want to stay with Arthur, and that shot following his back is a great way to do it, right? It's very much like, you know, like the Dardenne brothers. It's like, it's like, you know, it gives you that sense of like following somebody. If that's the only shot, we never really connect with him seeing his face for the rest of the shot because we wanted to take it all the way until he throws it out. Okay, so if you're following somebody, how do you get ahead of them? So when we pan to Brendan Gleeson and they're taking that other inmate out of the cell, we pan all the way 180. He's now leading him. It's a tiny little thing, but if you watch it again, it's actually an impossibility of...
I don't think I even realized.
Nobody will realize it, but I'm like letting you know, like watch it again. You'll see. So like basically...
I mean, that's a good thing that I didn't realize.
Well, yeah,
it would have been a fail if I'm like, oh.
No, I like the fact that nobody will ever notice it. But it's like you pan left, and if you keep panning 180, there's no way the person you just left, he'd be further ahead by another 6 feet. And basically, as we pan, it's very simple. Joaquin just basically pauses. But what's great about the way, by the time we come around, we don't miss a step. He's already walking. So it feels completely continuous. So it's just like a 180 shot that then, so that the rest of the shot, we're able to lean him and see his face digesting. So we get both a following and a leading shot without breaking any shot. Anyway, it's a
movie
tiny little
magic,
thing.
movie magic.
Like, I remember like waking up from a dream and going, how could you go from following to leading? And I was like, oh, maybe we could try this. And we tested it, and I was like, great. And then that was it. And it was like easier than I thought for something. I'm like, oh, that's something. And I didn't want it to be fancy, and it's not. It's just like a simple little thing.
You wanted it to be a certain way.
And then found a little solution that worked. And it's like one of those like, okay, that's good. All right, so then along the same lines, at the end of the movie, spoiler.
Yeah, this one's a big...
The courtroom blows up, which I think even in the trailer you can see, right? And then we find Arthur on the ground. He's not even coming to. And we follow him now for the next 7 minutes. And the thing, this came not out of like trying to build some fancy wonder. It came literally out of us figuring out, what's the point of this? And we're like, well, the point is really, honestly, it's like, just to stay with Arthur. So it all came from where it should be, which is, okay, what if we never left Arthur? He gets up, we sort of pan from what he sees to Harvey Dent. And then we pan back to him and he sort of walks over rubble to leave this hole in the wall. Well, that's a stage. And then it's like a little street that's replicating basically downtown Gotham.
Right.
So that little section is a blended cut on his back. It's basically a match cut. It's like, so as you were pushing, and that's with like a Ronin with 2 grips carrying to follow. So it's like that whole scene is with a Ronin, Sony Venice 2, walking him out of the courtroom on stage.
Venice 2 because of Rialto? Or?
Yeah, really small. Try to make everything really small because we knew we had to do these things like get inside a car, get out of a car.
So we wanted on the 65 for this.
No. This was like, and I didn't want to do it mini F. I wanted to go like really small and then stay that whole section, that whole sequences with the Venice 2. Because for the most part, on his back, we basically blend a match cut there. And so outside now, in the exterior, we're on a crane again, shooting that match cut. And the first thing we do as he goes out that door, so now we're on the exterior location, is we wrap back around and lead him down the rubble.
Yeah.
And as we pull away, now we're outside, and now we take the Ronin, which is on the end of that crane, and we demagnetize it. They have magnets that you can take it off of there.
Right.
And then we can continue around. As he walks away, he sees like this acolyte that's dressed like the Joker, who goes, let's go, come with me. And he throws him inside a car. We take the Ronin and we sort of follow Joaquin inside the car. Then comes the third shot, which is inside the car. We took a car, cut out the floorboard in between like the back seat, because we want him hiding. So we had to get low enough to be with him hiding below the height of the windows. And that's on an LED stage on a volume.
Okay.
And so that little section, we took the car, we raised it up about 18 inches. So the operator could be sitting basically on the floor and just with the little Venice 2, just swinging it around and operating it with just the lens.
Car's
and then
not moving anywhere.
None of that. And it's basically on a volume, because the volume allowed us to then, everybody, the guys who were driving, the passenger, plus Joaquin, to react to like going inside a tunnel.
Yeah.
Coming out of the tunnel and getting all the way to where like the traffic comes, and they say, oh, and then he makes the decision of like, I'm gonna bolt. And we push in after him on the volume stage, and then we match cut that pushing out of him on the downtown LA, which is dressed to look like Gotham, art directed amazingly for that whole section. And then there we sort of, double match that. So now on the location, we chase him out of the car, hand it off to two grips. So there's one person inside the car handing it to two grips who run after Joaquin. And this is similar almost to that shot we just described.
Yeah.
Which is if we chased him the whole way, the guys that are chasing him, you'd never see him.
Yeah.
So how do we get in front of him?
Yeah.
So then it's like, okay, chase him. He's running between cars. The door of the car opens, which makes him stop and have to double back. That gives us a chance to get ahead of him. When we get ahead of him, we're able to hand the Ronin off to a Griptrix, which is, like a little, almost like a golf cart.
Yeah.
And then that's able to run at his speed, because he's not going to slow down for camera. So now he's able to run as fast as we can, and because we're in a little car, now we can be ahead of him to see the guy behind him get hit by a car. And then at the end, we're able just to pan right and see him run away into like, the next scene.
Man, it blended so well.
Yeah.
I actually thought there would have been, I thought it was more of like, you somehow figured out.
No, it's just like those four cuts.
Such a good blend of different locations, different tools for different purposes.
And again, I wanted it to be like that nobody even notices, except maybe some point in the shot they go, has it had a cut? I didn't want people to think it was either fancy. I just wanted it to feel like we were staying with Arthur.
That's what it felt like. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Movie magic. Next time you're doing something like that, invite me on
Exactly.
set.
I mean, you can see, go online, you can see somebody from like a window shooting us. Like, 'cause at one point, I don't know, I think we fell or somebody, and they're like, oh my God. But yeah, no, so that was fun. But again, the most fun part about it is going, okay, how do we stay with Arthur? How do we never leave him? And then, the time between prepping and working out, is this possible? And is this good? And should we pursue it as a way to shoot the scene? Which comes in the form of testing, all the way through months later, executing it, and then having it work kind of the way you imagine.
How many days? Do you remember how many days that one scene took?
Well, I mean, each shot was probably one day, meaning him walking out of the courtroom was maybe part of a day.
Yeah.
Well, it was only one shot, so it was probably its own day. And we might have added something to that day because we had time. The other day when he's come, I think each one was almost one day, so 4 days.
Okay.
Yeah.
Dang, Larry, I love these conversations. It's so interesting to hear some of the behind the scenes, your workflow. I don't know. I feel like I learned so much.
Oh, thanks, man. It's great talking to you.
Thanks for making Shot Deck for us too. Like I know you made it for yourself, but I appreciate that you gave it to us though.
I made it for everyone, man. But I would say again, if you're watching this and you use Shot Deck, this idea of how many decks I build for every single project, that's a really important thing because, again, if you build them this way on the site, then they always have all the metadata still attached to them. If you just take a great shot, drag it to your desktop, put it in some other deck, it just loses all that fun metadata. You can't go back and look at other shots from there. And so I recommend doing that.
It's actually fun too, to just like kind of have some idea in your head and you're like, oh, let's see, like, and then you're like, oh, wait, this takes me to a completely different direction and I can take a little bit of this and a little bit of that, like.
And like even revisiting it today with you, I'm like, God, I don't even remember that shot being put in there, but I sort of vaguely remember why.
Yeah.
And again, they're not about like replicating them later. They're about, you know, like just feeding your brain to like maybe spark the new idea, which is going to become the movie.
Yeah. I love it. Well, I appreciate your time. What's the next movie? Can you say yet? Do we have to bleep that out?
In Australia. I'll say I'm moving into, I leave Sunday. I leave 2 days from where we're talking right now to go to do a movie in Australia. So we'll talk about that when I get back.
But you're going to invite me on set, right? Oh, this one?
Hey, you want to come to Australia? Let's make it happen.
I would love to.
I would love that.
Thanks, Ed. Appreciate it.
All right.
Go and check out Shot Deck. It's great. Check out Larry's work.
Hey,
you guys
by the way, if you haven't seen Folie, dude, watch it. Yeah. If you've seen it, watch it a second time. Trust me. I think the revisit's going to do you well.
I agree. If you're listening, anybody at the Oscars, I think you should get a nomination. I think it's really good. The cinematography is insane. Somebody listen.